Guess we can start. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Ken. I'll be your moderator for today. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd just like to point out one or two things. Drupal Camp Asheville has a code of conduct for the event, so just to make everyone aware, it's on the website. We want to make this a space for everyone, so let's be mindful and abide by that code of conduct. Um, There'll be time at the end of this presentation for question and answers. So drop your questions in the chat and we'll, get through them at the end of the presentation. So for this next session, we have Kevin. Kevin joins us from Georgia Institute of Technology, and they will be speaking about rebuilding the college website during a pandemic. So over to you, Kevin. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to make a disclaimer, two disclaimers really. One, while I've presented quite a bit, this is my first time on Hopin, so hopefully everything will go smoothly. However, second disclaimer, there is a pretty strong thunderstorm cell coming over my house right now, and for the next half an hour, so I may break up or drop off. I'll try to get back as soon as I can, but you can't control the weather, right? So, a little bit about myself. I'm going to make this bigger now. So I work at Georgia Tech. I graduated from Georgia Tech many moons ago and worked in central IT there for 16 years. Finally decided I am kind of sick and tired of being on call all the time as a web application administrator and sought out greener pastures. I'd been doing some web development, so I transferred over to the College of Liberal Arts, became their first full-time web developer in 2014. That was an interesting transition because as the first web developer, I was basically trying to organize everything. They had over 100 websites, about 30 of them were top-level sites. They'd all been built by different people in different ways, student assistants, faculty members, outside developers. There was no standardization. So my job was to bring them all into Drupal 7, which was the campus's preferred content system, and get them standardized with the official Georgia Tech theme. And while a couple of them were in Drupal, those were quite a bit of a mess. But this is not about all of the sites. This is about our main college website. So it was an interesting case. It was running on a homegrown content system that had been written by an outside developer from the ground up about 10 years before I got there. And a few months before I got there, the communications director had the developer update and upgrade that system. So she basically had no interest in taking that site to Drupal anytime soon. And since she was basically the owner of the site, I just had to go with that. But I had plenty of other sites. I, over the next 5 years, worked through 2 upgrades of all the other sites. First to Drupal 7, and then from 7 to 8, both times using paragraphs for our layout system. I was the first person at Georgia Tech to move to Drupal 8, so I was really pioneering the way, figuring it all out, and documenting what I did. And once I got all of that done, I began trying to teach others on campus how to get their Drupal 7 sites migrated to 8. All of that with other projects brought me along to 2020, the year of change. And so every now and then I had poked at the communications director and said, we ought to move that site to Drupal because being on a third-party homegrown system, there were basically 2 people in the whole world who knew how it worked. And I was always concerned if they both got hit by a bus, what were we going to do? Nobody else knew how all that code functioned. But she liked it and she wanted to stay with it. So come January last year, I was moving on and I was ready for my third upgrade of the rest of the sites. This time upgrading the layout builder, which had become production ready at the end of 2019. I really liked the way it looked. I mean, we've done a lot with paragraphs. It was a really good, solid module. I appreciate the work that the maintainers of that module put into it. But I like the idea of getting into a system that's part of core Drupal, that I know will likely be supported by the core developers for a long time to come. So I started building a toolkit to be able to use Layout Builder. It's planned to upgrade to that in the summer of 2020, and at the same time upgrade all of our sites to Drupal 9. Well, in February, the communications director came to me and said, I want to start planning an upgrade of the college site to Drupal. I about fell out of my chair, like thinking, really? What's happened? What's changed your mind? But I said to myself, let's not look a gift horse in the mouth. Let's just do it. We scheduled a meeting for the first week of March, and we laid out what she wanted to do. It was going to be a long project. She didn't really want to try to launch the new site until right about now, summer of 2021. But it was better than nothing. Well, I think we all know what happened around the second week of March last year. All heck broke loose with the pandemic, and it just kept going downhill from there. I certainly don't need to recap that because we all lived through it. But, my head was definitely spinning, and I was trying to figure out, from my point of view, my position, what am I going to be doing now, working from home? What are my projects going to look like? A lot of my smaller projects went on hold because, our faculty were swamped with just simply trying to figure out how to teach online. They're not used to doing that, so they had to transition to figuring out how to use video conferencing and all. They didn't have time to think about their website projects that I would normally be helping them with. So when life gives you lemons, you just got to do your best to make lemonade. And I focused on finishing my layout builder toolkit. I focused on doing all the discovery and planning for the college site. I got the initial base site set up and going. I said, let's just do all the work I can do on these two projects and try to knock them out. I knew I wanted the college site built with Layout Builder. There's no sense, right, building it in paragraphs and having to switch over, within a year. That would just be way too much work. So the discovery process was an interesting one. We are talking about a proprietary system. It had no documentation. The best thing I could do was try to catalog it in my own way. And when I teach others about how to migrate their sites from Drupal 7 or other systems to 8, I always say catalog, build a spreadsheet, share it with everybody involved, make sure everybody knows what's going on. I dug through the thing. I documented every page that I could find, the URL paths, what kind of page, what I need to do to get it into Drupal. I tried to identify all those key functionalities because it was a homegrown system. I had to really dig with it. I had to sit and talk through video conferences with the communications director. The good thing was most of what had been like custom programming in this proprietary system could all be done with built-in Drupal components, content types, taxonomies, views. The more I looked through it, the more I said, this is actually somewhat tractable. I might not have to spend near as much time as I thought. There were challenges. Ultimately, there were 231 pages that were static content pages to bring over. That's not including dynamic pages that would come from other systems, like our faculty profile system and news system. That might not seem like a lot to some people. It might seem like a ton to others. It just depends on what kind of sites you go and we work on. But in this case, there was really absolutely no way to export the content from this unique homegrown system. It actually had a very early rudimentary version of what we would call Layout Builder in Drupal. So its content was not just pages of standard content. It was built from blocks, and getting all of that out in some standard way and pushing it into Drupal when the data backend was completely different between the two, it's like I might get there, but it would be a big risk to spend all that time and possibly still not make it work. I decided the best path was extreme cut and paste migration. Just every single page, just recreate it in the new system, cut and paste the individual blocks of content, download and upload the images, and get it done. The upside, I had an ample chance to review and clean all that content. Now, I don't work directly for the communications unit. I work for IT, so it's not my place to really change the content, but I could be looking for typos, spelling mistakes. Most of all, I was looking for bad HTML code. They did a lot of creating their content in Word, Microsoft Word, and then pasting it into the site. And as a lot of you probably know, CK Editor does not, I'm sorry, they weren't on CK, but still, pasting in any editor typically doesn't clean up Word code very well. Word puts all these extra HTML tags, tons of CSS classes that mean nothing outside of Word. It gets very messy. And some of it changes your standard formats, your standard fonts and such. So I cleaned a lot of HTML code as I went along. It actually inspired me to write some tools to do this automatically, and tools that plug into CK Editor. I don't have time to really talk about them, maybe in another presentation later in the year, but those have been very helpful, after the fact. I also expected I was going to have help. Originally, when we first talked about this, I was going to have some student help and help from the director and her assistant. But with all the pandemic effects, they just didn't have time to help me. I had to do it pretty much all myself. Had a little IT support from my IT staff. They threw in a few hours here and there, but I mostly had to do it all on my own. Then, last June, as I was, getting ways into this, the communications director announced that she was retiring at the end of 2020. Suddenly, all became clear. I finally realized why she was willing to go to Drupal. She wasn't going to have to deal with it once we went there. I'm guessing she was going to retire right about now, and with the pandemic, she just pushed it back and said, let's get out of here at the end of December. So that changed the deadline. I had to launch at the end of December. But I felt like I could do it. I felt like I had enough underway that I could get there. I just had to make sure I managed my time right. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about how I built this site from a philosophy standpoint. I can't go into this too deeply, but basically, I approach all these sites from the idea of simplicity, abstraction, and sustainability. I feel like this is the formula for sites that are going to be easy to use, easy to manage, and easy to keep going for a long time to come. Simplicity is, keep it simple. Don't overload the site with third-party modules and custom modules, especially things that aren't necessary. I try to scrutinize anything that someone asks for and try to make sure there's really a need to do that it's not just gratuitous or decadent. I try to build everything I can from core components. It's easy to want to just throw on extra third-party modules because it looks like they do something that's helpful. But if you dig into core Drupal, there's a lot you can do. And I got probably 95% of this site built without having to use anything external. You just have to learn how core Drupal works, which is something of a learning cliff, but it's worth learning if you're going to build in Drupal. Abstraction, I look at this in two ways. One is I try to genericize everything. I have a small number of generic modules and generic layout components that have a lot of options within them. That way, I can manage them all in a simple way. I have one master site where I can build and test all these things, and then I push them off to all the other sites that I support. And because customizations come in the form of just checkbox options, I can test them whenever there's a Drupal upgrade and know pretty quickly that everything's going to work or find the issues and fix them. I avoid one-off custom components because that just adds to your support headache. Every one of those has to be tested individually. I also try to see if I can split off content to other sites. I really abhor what I call the Franken site, where somebody has clugged 10 different functionalities into one site, oftentimes with 4 or 5 dozen modules that do different things. And I've seen some of these. I've seen other people dealing with them. A lot of times, there are projects that become a full year just to do a single Drupal upgrade. And we're not even talking about like Drupal 8, even like 6 to 7 becomes a full year because you try to fix one thing and upgrade it and you break 5 others. I'd rather have several small sites and be able to do them one at a time. That just makes it easier. Also, a big thing is I fully believe only public content on a public site. This old version of the college site had intranet content on it. And that was the first thing I said, we got to get that off of there. That needs to be behind a firewall on a real intranet service, not on the public site. So you peel all these things off, and then suddenly the project isn't quite as complicated and quite as big as it looked like in the beginning. This all feeds into sustainability. Don't set yourself up for assured failure. If you fail to be simple, you fail to abstract, you're just likely going to have problems down the road the next time you have to upgrade Drupal. I try to use only well-supported modules, ones that have a good update history, ones where I see that they're being treated well and not just left out there to languish. And most of all, I only use the preferred methods to extend Drupal. I'll admit, I used to hack and kludge back in the Drupal 7 days and the Drupal 6 and 5 days. It just seemed easier. I didn't have time to figure it all out. So I just go right to the database and pull stuff, and I just output whatever I wanted where I needed to. Now, I spent the time the last couple of years, I learned how to use entity APIs, how to use render arrays, and create override templates to format content types and taxonomies and fields and such, and how to use Twig the right way. And by doing that, when I went from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, it was very seamless. There were a couple of little things that had to be fixed, but it was what you would expect, not tons of, oh my gosh, this broke, this broke, this broke, which is what's going to happen if you hack and kludge. So now I want to show you the site itself. You cannot go to the URL that you might see in my browser bar, but if you want to look at the site itself, you can go to the live site at iac.gatech.edu. This is our dev site so that when I change things, I'm not affecting the real world. So you can see our front page. This front page is built in Layout Builder. 96% of the pages are Layout Builder. We're using the concept of Layout Builder where each page has its own layout override. This stems from the way I built things in paragraphs previously, which was a similar concept of laying out each page individually, building it up from individual layout components. And because of that, I have built a lot of custom layouts that basically fit together one after another. So we have, of course, the ones that are built in, 1, 2, 3, and 4 columns. We have some special versions of those that do a full color background from the left edge of the page to the right edge. That was something the communications director really, really liked and really wanted. So I figured out a way to make that work. It was not easy with our Georgia Tech theme, but I found a way to work around it. Layout for a 5-picture image montage, layouts for headlines. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Those are like your hero images. Blurb Gallery set, accordion set, tab panel sets, and tree view, which is kind of like accordion, but any number of sections can be open at once instead of just one section at a time in an accordion. So pages are built up from those layouts, and then blocks are dropped into the regions. I talk about generic components. So many of these sections are just simply a standard content block. And what I've done is I built the standard content block with a ton of options. So you can control things like the style of the title. Is it centered or not centered? Does it have a gray border? You can control, is it a subsection, in which case the title is marked up with heading level 3 instead of 2. That's actually kind of a big problem for accessibility with Drupal and Layout Builder. Every block by default comes out heading level 2, but sometimes you have them nested, and you need that heading, that title to be a different heading level. So I figured out a way to work around that. I have the ability to pick different color schemes. These are 5 pre-approved color schemes that are based on our Georgia Tech color palette. A main image and ability to control where that image shows up, the main body content for the block, and then a more information link. Each of these components is optional, so you can, if you don't need the body, if you just want an image and a link, you can do that. If you don't need a more information link or an image, you can leave them out and just have a body. Whatever works. I want it to be very generic, easily reusable. I want as few block types as possible. There are times we need other formats. So this is an example of something that's a lot like a photo album. I call it a Blurb Gallery set. It starts with a layout. This is a kind of layout I honestly would love to see built into Drupal someday. When you configure it, I built this all myself. This is one of our custom features. This provides an ability to put a title that's associated with this group of blocks. The title can be hidden, however, because sometimes the content people don't want it showing, but it's hidden visually, meaning that screen readers can still see it and read it aloud. It just won't show up on the page. You can choose whether this photo album, this gallery set is 3, 4, or 2 columns. You don't have to plug in a specific style layout. You know, this one layout can handle all these different options. And that means also if you've set it up and you want to change from 4 to 3 or 3 to 5 or something, you just change the drop down. You don't have to remove one layout and plug in another and move all the blocks. And a few other features that make this a little easier to use. But the big difference in this and the standard 4 columns is that this works like a typical photo album, like a book that you would pick up and look at the photos. It flows across first, and then down to the next row and across, and down to the next row and across. Whereas the built-in, let's say, 4-column layout, it flows down one column, and then down the next, and down the next, and down the next. So this is, I think, more tractable to content people who are thinking more about albums like this of either navigation blocks or just plain old images that they want to show with descriptions. Another way I've tried to use built-in Drupal components is by making heavy use of things like the taxonomy. So we have a lot of lists being a college. We have lists for things like our degrees, our certificates, our minors, our schools, careers that connect with these different programs. And in the old site, a lot of that was just static information typed into a page. But sometimes it needs to be on 2 or 3 pages. And guess what happens? You know, somebody updates one page, they forget to update the other ones. Things get out of sync. And also, you know, with people trying to copy and paste from Word, they end up with lists that are misformatted. Certain lines are bigger or smaller than others, indented in different ways. What I have done, I use the taxonomies. So all of the lists are in one place, one copy of them. And then where we need to show it, like say this page, this is just a view block that outputs all of the master's degrees that are of type degree program. And then, you know, where we have a minors page, there's a view block that outputs all of the minors from the minors taxonomy. And this is especially useful with areas where the lists appear in different places. So here we have just the list of names, followed by a list of names of doctoral programs or PhDs. There's another page that gives full detail about the masters. This is coming from the same taxonomy. This is another view block, and it's just pulling out the title and the description and showing them. So now the content people, they don't have to worry about formatting. They don't have to worry about how many places do we list it. They just go to the taxonomies, they add records, they edit records, they delete records when needed, and all the associated lists update automatically. From that, I was able to build the one interactive tool that I had to build through custom coding. This was something the communications director had on the old site. She really liked it. And it's a tool that lets somebody come here and they can explore all of our majors, minors, and certificates by a career path or a school. So we'll take the career path, and this is pulling up all the careers that are in that taxonomy. Someone can select the ones that they want to look into, and then submit, and it will come back and show them here which majors, minors, and certificates connect with those careers. And this module that I wrote, it's using those entity APIs to connect and pull from the taxonomies and pull from the degree type of node content, get all that information. It's not entered a second time. It's not yet another thing to have to update later. Everything comes from one central source. Another tool we've heavily used is the media library. I love that this is available now in Drupal because I was asked a lot back in the Drupal 7 days for photo galleries. And to do a photo gallery in Drupal 7 or earlier, you usually had to install about 4 or 5 third-party modules, hope and pray they might still work at the next upgrade of Drupal. And it was still kind of flaky as to what you could get. Now, everything you need is right here in Drupal. So this photo gallery, this is built from Media Library. This is a block that provides a Media Library reference field. So if I open this up to edit it, you would be able to add pictures to it from the library or upload new pictures into this library. Or you can move them around, delete them. And when you save, this layout is generated by having Media Library output the automatic thumbnail and the description. And then I applied a override template to format all of this as a grid. This is CSS grid with an override, a fallback to CSS Flexbox. So it's fully accessible. It's fully responsive. The accessibility part, there was one tiny little thing I had to work around, but I still was able to do it without truly custom coding, just another custom override template. And that was the fact that if you want this to be accessible, it should be one link wrapped around the image and the description. But if you try to set that up in Drupal field management, you can put a link around the image and a separate link around the description. You can't get it around both, not with just core Drupal. You might be able to use something like field group, something like that. But like I say, try to stay away from third-party modules if I can find a more elegant way to do it. And the override template let me do that without having to install more code. I just set up in the template to tell it output the link first, and then inside of it, call the proper code to render the image, and then output the description. And it works beautifully. The one thing that someone would want, there we go. So there's the full-size image. When I click on it, some people might want that image to be in a modal on the same page. That's one place I probably would turn to a module, because I know there's at least a couple out there that will open those images in a modal. So I'm not afraid to use a module when it works and it saves me trouble. But if I don't need it, if I can do something more elegantly with core Drupal, I'm going to do it that way. We also use Media Library for a lot of faculty pictures. That was something we had a lot of them uploaded 4, 5, 6 times on the old site because there was no image library for managing images. But now we can have a simple library, 1 picture per faculty member or staff member. And then from that, I created a block type that's a contact card. And this is a media library reference field. So it's just letting the person who set this card up select the right image from the library. They don't have to upload yet another picture. All of this is fields. I want to open this up and just show really fast that creating, setting up one of these is just as simple as filling in the name, the title, selecting the picture, then fields for the other options. It's easy to want to say, well, I'm taking away design abilities from the communicator, right? Because I'm doing all of that for them. But at the same time, this does make their lives easier. And there are options they can toggle to have some level of design control. It's just that I don't want them to be doing design from scratch, because then they're likely to vary it too much from page to page or even within a page. And with all those odd variances, it just doesn't look professional anymore. This is clean and consistent all the way through the site. And if there is a desire for a new component, I'd rather just help them build a new component than to give them this entire design toolkit where they can go, all over the place with it. Last thing I want to show is experts for media. So this was one of the last things that was built on the old site. It was something that the communications director really liked, definitely wanted to keep. And that was one I thought I might have to do some coding, but in the end, I was able to do everything between views and another type of application of layout builder. So this is a view block with an exposed filter. And so that lets someone coming here pick an area of expertise and then see which of our faculty are experts in that area. And this is just pulling from a custom content type for faculty experts. But the really neat thing about this is a fairly sophisticated layout, as you can see. And this is a simple contact box. There could actually be other links here, like for Twitter, Facebook, etc., each with their icon. Most of this custom layout I did by using Layout Builder. So the content type itself, once again, just has fields for collecting the information. It has a section for contact information. This is where Twitter and Facebook links can be added. It has field for selecting what school they're with, title, areas of expertise, all these different things that make up a faculty expert page. And then I use the traditional concept of Layout Builder to format all instances of this faculty expert type in the same way. And I didn't have to do anything on the back end, except I added some JavaScript to wedge in these little icons. So let me show one that's a little bit more detailed. So here's somebody with a Twitter icon and a Twitter link. So, this is all just reusing, even this is reusing my existing tab panel component. I discovered I can just use it for formatting 3 fields within a standard content type. And I didn't have to rewrite any code whatsoever. So I love this, but once I really got a grasp on all these different features of core Drupal, I could do all this stuff with little to no extra outside, custom code. So I'm going to wrap it up now. Some fun statistics here. We did have 231 pages. For those pages, it took 702 layout builder blocks and 1,043 document and image files. The feeling of a year-long project complete? Priceless. I did make it. I did get this launched at the end of December last year. It was, I'll say, 98% working. We found a few things early this year that didn't quite make it, but given the path of this project, that was a really good track record because we honestly had no time to sit down together and review the final site. I got everything finished and it just basically, I launched it. Some people would say, oh, that's, not a good way to do it. Some developers might say, oh, that's a developer's dream come true to be able to just launch the site without all the criticism first. But, I think I would have taken a little bit of review if I could have gotten it. We just didn't have the time. Another interesting statistic, with all of the excess stuff that was on that site, it was 11 gigabytes originally. And it was actually overflowing the web hosting we had available, which was only 10 gigabytes. And I kept worrying much of 2020 that Central IT was going to come to us and say, you've got to clean some stuff out. And I couldn't find much of anything that I could safely clean out because I just couldn't tell with that old content system what was in use and what wasn't. When I finished, I took a look at how big the site was when I copied it up to the web hosting. 370 megabytes. That's like 3.5% of what it previously encompassed. I think that's a really good reduction. Now, a lot of that, I'll admit, was internet content that I got properly off to the internet. But a good chunk of it was just duplicate images, old images that the old system wouldn't ever delete. So they just piled up on there for 10 years, things like that needed to be cleaned out. So this is a good reduction. And I think there's going to obviously be plenty of room for this to grow with a nice, slow pace. So my lessons learned, like I said, when you get lemons, do your best to turn them into lemonade. We couldn't do much about the pandemic, but we could try to adapt to it and do what we could with what we got. That planning spreadsheet, a lifesaver. I could not have completed this project without it. You may think, oh my gosh, it's going to take so much time to try to document first before I migrate. It's worth it. Take the time to do it. Then you can, literally checkbox every page and make sure it all came over, that you didn't miss anything. Never promise the impossible, but don't rule out the improbable. Know when to be gentle but firm when you know that something isn't going to work. Now, that a lot depends on who you're working with. There was a nice session earlier today about how to win at arguments. And this project, was a bit challenging for me in that sense because the previous communications director, as I mentioned, she was very set on the old system. She had been able to basically have anything she wanted. As long as she could find the money to pay that developer, she could have that developer write it into the custom system anywhere, anyway, anyhow. But with Drupal, you've got to extend it through the available APIs. That means you can't necessarily wedge something in somewhere. You have to put it in the place that makes sense. What I found with her, and this may vary from person to person, but this could be quite useful technique. Even when I knew the answer was no, I found it was better to just say, let me look into it. That she seemed to be more accepting of the idea that something won't work if she thought I was reviewing it right then and there, even though I might know it because I've worked with Drupal for umpteen years. So I'd come back 3 or 4 days later and I would email her and say, I've looked into it. We can't do it this way, but here's some other options. So delaying the no, sometimes that can help instead of trying to say no in a live meeting. Make the most of what you have. One thing I certainly had a lot of at the start of the pandemic was time. So I used that time as best as I could and migrated a ton of pages. I said, some of these are going to change before the end of the year is out, but it's better to go ahead and copy them rather than have to build them from scratch in a hurry in December. And it proved that was very much the case. It was much easier to just quickly update things that had changed, and that let me get through the December work really fast. So last little thing, I think it's important to realize as a developer and also as a communicator, Drupal 8 and 9 are not like the predecessors. You cannot expect to build a site and manage a site anymore in Drupal if you do not have strong technical knowledge or somebody in your organization who does. I saw someone mention somewhere recently, Drupal is really no longer a content management system. It's a framework, a content framework. I fully agree with that. And so if you're a developer, you should make sure your clients understand they need to plan for paying for technical support for the life of the site, not just what they need to get the site up and running. And if you're a content kind of person, you need to be aware you're going to have to find funding to support Drupal for the long haul if you're going to use it. And if not, it may be that you need to look at something else. Hate to turn people away from Drupal, but honestly, realizing that we may have to do that with small units that don't have technical skills. So if you have questions, we got a few minutes left. You can post to the chat area or email me later on at webdev@iac.gatech.edu. And the slides are available at webdev-pres.iac.gatech.edu/college site.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for that great demo and insightful journey. We do have 3 questions, and being conscious of time, just have a look. I'll probably read 1 or 2, and let's see how we go. So during the demo, Bernardo asked, "Are those cards one block or a collection of blocks?"
I'm assuming the contact cards. The contact cards are each a single block.
Right. Next question, Bernardo again. How was the training curve for your editors?
Mostly they picked it up fairly fast. They had been trained in paragraphs, and I tried to keep the terminology the same. That helps tremendously if they can see names for layouts that they're familiar with. But I also made a online training course. It takes probably about 20 minutes, and it takes them through how everything works. And that seemed to help a lot too. That was kind of necessitated by the fact of when the pandemic hits, like, I'm not going to be able to do in-person training.
Good. One last question. How much freedom do you get within the GT theme?
We're basically told everything between the menu bar and the site footer we can somewhat customize, but we in that area need to keep still to the color palette and the standard font, but we get more leeway there. Menu bar and above and site footer and below are supposed to keep to the standard look and feel.
Good. There's a request if you could post the link to the slides here on the chat, please. That would be appreciated. So just before we leave, I just want to quickly share my screen. Coming up next, we've got a break until 4 p.m. and then we're back for some formal sessions. How to take the stress out of writing case studies, growing pains, moving from developer to manager, WordPress to Drupal 8 migration, a look at process plugins, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility in digital spaces. 4 great sessions. So hopefully, we're looking forward to seeing you then. So the final thing is to say a big thank you and a round of applause to Kevin. Thank you so much for the great session presentation, and thank you all who joined us here today. Thank you. See you over at the next session. Bye bye.